Alright, we're back at the shower. Today's video, I think we're going to try and get some footage of how we make our miters, how we cut them on the wet saw, and how we take our 4-inch grinder and back bevel them, and also how we ease the edge with our variable speed buffer. With the 50.
Miter day's the best day.
Miter day's the best day. What grip pad do we use? The 100 or the 200?
Well, 50 really gets a profile nice, but 200 doesn't.
The 50 is really aggressive, the 200 really cleans up the edge. Alright, so stay tuned and you'll see how we make some miters. Bye-bye. Let me get this angle right. Get the angle right for you. There's the angle. Oh, dang. No. Alright, right there. See that crisp? That's the back side of the tile. So we're gonna put miter pieces on here. All the way down. Down and up. And then, here is our shower floor tile. All these little bubble looking things. We have all our 4-inch pieces cut. See those chips on the edge there. So we're going to clean those up with that 200 pad there on a variable speed buffer. This is our 4-inch grinder with a P4 blade on the Makita with the paddle switch. So this is another way you can do it instead of using the grinder. So that grinder on this subway tile, it's kind of melting the glaze, so it's not cutting very fast. On this DeWalt, we've got that function. We can lift it up, give ourselves more room, and then we can just make the miters like this. The other thing that you guys might be wondering with this DeWalt saw is why don't we just, like a lot of you guys probably know, this has this function back here where you can turn this and actually pivot the saw. This thing pivots to like a 45, but it doesn't really go past a 45. If you're trying to make miters with that pivot feature on the DeWalt saw, when you're pushing these things through, this blade like can deflect, right? And when it deflects, then you're actually getting, since you already had only 45 degrees to start with, like if it deflects at all, then it's going to cause that angle to be like not acute enough, if that makes sense. So your miters won't come together tight. It won't give you a nice 90-degree angle. When we make our miters, keeping the saw right up and down, and at least on subway tile, we can use the saw and we can control, like if that blade's just straight, then we can control this angle like that to make sure that that's more than a 45. So things are going to come together nice and tight like they should. Right there at that angle, when we do it with this up and down, like we can get the angle a lot flatter. See, that's just a pure 45. And if the blade deflects at all, then it's less than 45. These are the ones we did either by hand or with the blade straight up and down. You see how much sharper that angle is? So that gap there, I don't know if you can see that gap. That gap gives us some play, right? But if they're just exact 45s, like we have no play then. If you don't have any play, then you can't ensure that you can get that looking exactly like it needs to look. So we like to do them by hand just so we can make that angle sharper than a 45. On bigger porcelain tile, like this 12 by 24 right here, it's almost impossible for us to get the miter that we want on that wet saw. So big tiles like that, we miter those almost exclusively with our 4-inch grinder. You can use the wet saw to do the subway tile because the subway tile is nice and small, so you can fit it underneath that blade real good and just run them through real quick. But obviously you can't turn a 12x24 this way and run it through the saw that way. And then if you pivot that head, then especially with a hard porcelain, that blade just has a tendency to veer off from side to side. Half-inch trowel, lots of mud, lots of coverage. You might think that's overkill for Subway, but these are 4x16s, they got a bow, and honestly the overkill just ensures that we get all the coverage that we want. Alright guys, one other thing I wanted to talk to you about is when you make your cuts on your wet saw, it's always going to leave those little chips along that cut. So that's why it's important to get one of these tools right here. By the way, if you guys didn't know, Metabo just bought out Hitachi. Now we look at that piece and you see that all those chips are gone. It's the little things like that that really set your work apart versus if you were just to leave those chips on there. All these, the edges have been eased on every one of these cuts. Same thing with every one of these over here. We rip this bottom a little bit, ease the edge on that. Right, so there's no chippy, no sloppy looking cuts. There it is, all cleaned up.